Hi, everyone. So today I want to talk about sound therapy, sound frequency therapy, listening therapy, music therapy. There's all these different terms it falls under. And is it a gimmick? Is there actual science behind it? We're going to talk a bit about that today because it ties very much into what I wrapped up last week in terms of auditory processing disorder, and it really leads into all kinds of the things that kids struggle with, such as dyslexia, learning disabilities, ADHD, autism spectrum, and so forth. And sound and music is very much used in the field of educational therapy, occupational therapy, and just brain training in general. And when I first heard about it, I just thought that's ridiculous until you understand more of the science and the mechanism behind it. So I want to just put this in real time and not just bore you to death. And I just want to clarify the problem is that the reason we're sometimes skeptical about these things is because we have been so used to the concept that kids are going to improve with their learning if they're sitting at a table doing academic work. We think that improving learning involves practice, more math, practicing their times tables, practicing their phonics, all that type of stuff, practicing their handwriting, all of that type of stuff. And it's really not the case. That's where we're practicing a skill. But in order for that skill to for a child to be able to practice that skill, they have to have the foundation, and that's where sound frequency therapy, among other therapies, can really come into play. So what I wanted to, and I just want to say first, I will be talking more about all of that in terms of root causes and options and so forth in my free live training that I will be doing on the 21st of November, which is this Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll put the link to sign up for that in the comments below. But let me tell you about Jack, who was a stereotypical military dad. He was really skeptical, no nonsense, and just didn't buy into anything that he thought was hocus pocus. And really great guy. So he had a son who had autism spectrum, and he had ADHD, and he had dyslexia. So there's a lot going on with his son. And he had already signed on to kind of the first part of my program, and they were doing movement therapy and so forth, and he had seen improvement with that. But I said to him, given what your son is struggling with, I really recommend the sound or music therapy. And he kind of looked at me and said, I showed him how it works. I showed him the headphones, which I will bring out for you next time I talk about this. And Dad said, you think that's supposed to help my son, a set of headphones? So I'll just quickly say first, it's not a regular set of headphones. It's not what you would buy in the store. It has all kinds of different things, and it's even used in hospitals and so forth. But all of that aside, I'm going to talk about that another time. I just want to say Dad was really surprised because in no time, his son was making incredible gains. His son was was reading. His son, he said, we can't believe how he's able to sit still at the dinner table. The teachers have noticed how focused he is, and that was just the beginning. By the end of the program, we thought we would have to do a very specific dyslexia intervention. He didn't even need to do that. The teachers could not believe how many reading levels he had gone up. They were going to pull him out of French immersion, the parents were, because they thought it was too much to have him in two languages, and they decided not to because the teacher said, why would you do that? He's just made incredible gains. We don't know what you've done, and so forth. And all of a sudden, he was just so much more social. It just improved his emotional regulation and so forth, all because of sound or listening or music therapy. So you might be wondering, how can that be? So let me explain a very little bit of it today. I'm going to get into it more in the next couple of videos, but so basically what happens is the music enters the auditory nerve. And then once it enters the auditory nerve, the stimulation goes to two places. It goes mostly to the brain, okay? But it also goes to the nerves, which are the motor nerves in the nervous system. And that is obviously important for motor control, which is why, oh yes, another thing that really improved with this boy was he had a lot of problems with coordination, balance, and so forth. He had dyspraxia as well. And they couldn't believe his karate teacher said, oh my goodness, his coordination has improved so much. So yes, this might sound hard to believe. Well, how could stimulating the auditory nerve improve coordination and balance and handwriting, all that other stuff? But when you start understanding that the auditory nerve not only sends messages to the brain, but the motor system in the body, but also think about your inner ear, right? There's your vestibular system. So there's the cochlear, which is what hears, and then there's the vestibular system, which is our balance and motor coordination and all of that, and connected to all of that type of stuff. So what happens is, as a result of the auditory nerve being stimulated by this sound therapy, what happens is it improves cognition and it also improves motor control. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that movement develops the brain. That a big part of my programs is targeted movement therapies to target certain areas of the brain. So when we're doing both at the same time, we're stimulating the brain and we're also stimulating helping to stimulate the nerve that then connects to the motor system in the body. All of a sudden, things are really going to come together. So, and just keep in mind, as I said, the ears do so much more than hear, right? I talked a lot about that in the past, but they are also very connected to balance, and that therefore connects us to the whole movement, body awareness, and so forth. And the brain uses the same pathways that is used for language, and also that is used for movement, as it does for for processing of music. So take a 4-year-old who has not been socialized, right? Not been taught what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Take them out anywhere and put on some like jamming music. They will move. They will start moving to it, right? And a lot of us will, even as adults. And the reason why is because that music enters our auditory nerve. It stimulates our brain. It energizes us on a mental level, but it also starts making us move. And that is because that sound stimulates that system, that motor system in the nervous system. Okay, so basically, there was Pierre Sellier, who, by the way, wrote Listening for Wellness. And I thought it was super cool or super interesting whenever I learned that 50% of the brain's energy is generated by our body movement. So you can see why kids moving in class is so important, because what happens is the body moves, it stimulates the vestibule, that part in the inner ear, and that vibration actually generates, the ear actually acts as a generator for brain energy. So if kids are sitting for 2 to 3 hours straight and not moving, they're literally losing 50% of their brain power. So what does this have to do with sound and music therapy? Is that what happens is when we stimulate the auditory nerve in a very specific way with these different frequencies. This is not just like they're listening to whatever, they have to listen to something very specific with these headphones. It stimulates, first of all, it generates that energy, and that creates stimulation in the brain, which helps to create new neurons and pathways and so forth. But let me get into a little bit of how the brain communicates. So number one, the brain communicates in 2 ways. It communicates, number one, with chemical signals via neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, all that type of stuff, which are very localized and specific. And the second way the brain communicates is with electrical signals. Okay. So the electrical signals, in terms of these neurons, create electrical energy, which basically communicate with other regions of the brain. And if you think of it this way, number two, the electrical energy is the kind of, I don't want to say optimal, not that we don't need the neurotransmitters, but it is the national language of the brain. You know how countries have like a national language? Well, it's the national language of the brain. So if we get that electrical stimulation via the auditory nerve, via the sound frequency therapy, then we're creating all kinds of good, generating electrical energy, stimulating neurons, stimulating them to grow new pathways and so forth. And that will create a better developed brain with stronger connections that is no longer disorganized, because the more pathways there are, the better organized the brain is going to be. So basically the sound therapy via the vibrations and frequencies and so forth provide the very source of energy that is needed by the brain to stimulate the growth of new neurons and new pathways. So tell me if you don't find that super cool. I will give you one more amazing example of a client I had several years ago who was nonverbal autistic. He was one of my first clients, 14 years old. He did this sound frequency therapy, and within 5 months he was speaking in non-scripted sentences and was making eye contact because of this therapy. And I'm not someone who says it's a cure-all. There was other components and so forth, but I was skeptical at first too, so it was really cool and empowering as someone who had just dived into this when I first started and was still a bit like, oh man, I hope this works as well as the research says it does. And it really did. So I will be talking more about this and other options in my webinar, in the masterclass, live training, whatever you want to call it, that I will be offering November 21st, which is this Saturday coming up at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll put the link in the comments below. And so just keep in mind, varying frequencies creates neurological stimulation, and basically creates new circuits and new pathways. And that is how we build that foundation so that kids can be better at reading, so they can actually learn how to read. There's a reason why the instructional strategies that teachers or tutors are using and are not working, and it's because that foundation is not there. So let me know in the comments below if you've heard of sound frequency therapy, if you've tried it, if you're curious about it. And like I said, I will post the link in the comments below for the webinar on the 21st of November. Thanks for watching.